Good evening. I hope you're having a wonderful afternoon. I hope that you were able to join us for worship services this morning, either at the building or perhaps you were able to watch our stream online. We had a great morning of worship. I feel like we had a large number of people back this morning. And we also were blessed with a baptism that we're so thankful for. Cooper Lambert was baptized and put on Christ this morning. So we're very thankful and we rejoice about that. It's just been a wonderful day, a bright sunshiny day outside, but it was a bright and sunshiny day at our worship service this morning because of the things that went on, because of getting to worship God, and of course because of the decision that young man made to dedicate his life to Christ. So we are very thankful for that, and I just pray that you were able to take part in that in some way. Now, as far as the thought goes that I want to give you for taking with you into your week, when we start reading in the Sermon on the Mount, beginning in Matthew chapter 5, the Bible says, "Seeing the great crowds, he went up on the mountain, and when he sat down, his disciples came to him. And he opened his mouth and taught them, saying, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." Now, when we hear that, do we think, is Jesus saying that a person that, if they're poor in spirit, does that mean a person doesn't have much spirit in them and they're just kind of cowering away or hunkering in a corner, or they're not very spiritually enthusiastic, they don't have much zeal for God? No, certainly not. That's not what he's talking about whatsoever. And I think that we could reason this out and I could give you an explanation of it, but I think that I can give you an example of a parable that makes me think of what a person would look like if they are poor in spirit. And this parable is in Luke chapter 18, beginning in verse 9. This is what Jesus says, or this is what the Bible says. It says, "He also told this parable to some who trusted in themselves that they were righteous and treated others with contempt. Two men went up into the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee, standing by himself, prayed thus, God, I thank you that I'm not like other men, extortioners, unjust, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week, I give tithes of all that I get. But the tax collector, standing afar off, would not even lift his eyes to heaven, but beat his breast, saying, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. I tell you, this man went down to his house justified rather than the other. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, but the one who humbles himself will be exalted." Now, when we look at this, I think that we can figure out what it means to be poor in spirit. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs shall be the kingdom of heaven. We want to be poor in spirit because we want to be blessed and in good favor with God, and we want ours to be the kingdom of heaven, our kingdom to be the one that is after this world. So if we're going to be poor in spirit, then we need to be a person, not a person that's not zealous for God, not a person that's not spiritual with God, but a person who recognizes their state as a lost sinner without God's help. That's what we have to recognize. We could even mistakenly look at this thing with the Pharisee and the tax collector and say, I'm glad I'm not like that Pharisee. Well, in doing that, we do the same thing that he did. But what God is looking for is a person of a humble spirit. We have zeal for God. We're a spiritual person, but we recognize our state, that we are sinners, that all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God, that all need God's help, that all need Jesus Christ in order to be saved. And that should be a very humbling thing for us to have that knowledge. And it should affect not only how we interact with God, but how we interact with other people. And who do you think interacts better? The man that beats on his breast as the tax collector did, recognizing that he needs God's help, or the man that's standing back saying, well, I'm thankful I'm not like this guy? What do you think God's looking for as we go out into the world? So this affects not only how we interact with God, but it affects how we treat our fellow man and the manner of humility that we show toward interacting with a fellow man. And if we want ours to be the kingdom of heaven, then we're going to have to humble ourselves in this life. In James chapter 4, verses 7 through 10, James says, "Submit yourselves therefore to God. Resist the devil, he will flee from you. Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. Cleanse your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. Be wretched and mourn and weep. Let your laughter be turned to mourning and your joy to gloom. Humble yourselves before the Lord, and He will exalt you. Friends, if we will humble ourselves in this life, bow down to God, recognize that we need God's help, recognize that we're no better than anyone else when it comes to sin, we'll be far better off in this life, and ours will be called the kingdom of heaven. I just pray that you'll be able to take these thoughts with you as you go into your week, that you'll be able to use these thoughts to interact with God, and that you'll be able to use these thoughts to better enact with your fellow man. Thank you, and I pray that you have a blessed week.